Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, April 7th, 2022. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Luke Savage, writer for Jacobin Magazine and author of The Dead Center. Reflections on liberalism and democracy after the end of history. And later in the program, Rana Abdelhamid, congressional candidate running in New York's 12th district. Meanwhile, the Senate is expected to confirm Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court today, making her the first Black woman to sit on the court in history. Despite very appropriate cynicism about the court's function, cynicism I share, this is a historic day. It really is. More civilians are fleeing Ukraine as Russian forces move out of the Kyiv suburbs and begin to coalesce in the east. Over 11 million Ukrainians have fled their homes since the start of the invasion. And while the EU considers banning Russian coal, and the U.S. has announced additional sanctions against Russian banks and Putin's daughters, specifically, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has gone a different direction. He will pay for Russian gas in rubles, breaking with the other European Union countries, rather. Right-wing authoritarians have to stick together, right? The Omicron subvariant BA2 is on the rise in the Northeast, specifically here in New York City, weeks after the city lifted many of its masking and vaccine requirements. For now, infections are largely being seen in the under 35 population, but it could be disastrous if it spreads to the elderly. This comes as researchers are meeting with the FDA to explore a modified COVID vaccine for the fall. The cost of distribution of a revamped COVID vaccine will cost billions, and Congress has yet to approve Biden's requested COVID relief money because he decided to lift Title 42. So Republicans are blocking it. And lastly, the House has voted to hold Peter Navarro and Dan Scavino in contempt after refusing to comply with the January 6th probe. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to Thursday. I mean, it's my favorite day of the week for the show. That's not true. That's not true.
Slam on Sam.
That's not true.
Right off the bat.
I have to carry more of the weight, so I have to be a bit more on point on these days. So it's probably actually not my favorite day of the week. I'd have to think about it. Mondays.
Get your work straight, Jack.
Oh, come on, Jack. Yeah, I would say maybe casual Friday, but that Majority Report Thursdays is definitely up there. Definitely up there because I get to freewheel it and free ball it. I'm free balling it by saying free balling it. Anyway. Yes, today the Senate is going to vote to confirm Ketanji Brown Jackson. As we've mentioned on the show before, there are 3 Republicans who have joined to vote yes: Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins. They did this for their own personal branding and reputation, and to disarm Democrats from using their typical obstructionist behavior against them and treating the Republican Party as an extremist monolith, which is what we should be doing. So let's be real about that. No praise for Murkowski, no praise for Collins, no praise for Romney. This is a part of a way to make sure that the Democrats aren't able to attack Republicans adequately, even though even if they all voted against her, that the Democrats still wouldn't be able to find a way to
Yeah,
attack Republicans
it
adequately.
gives people like Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro like a day to pretend like they're not just in lockstep with GOP incentives. Like Steven Crowder had a show. Crowder, what a piece of, and then SH''T Mitt Romney, and that was his show for that day.
Yeah,
so.
right. So that's they're trying to have the flip side of like when we have shows just crapping all over Joe Manchin, for example.
Right.
They get to pretend like
Except they love Joe
there's
Manchin.
right. But for us, it's like that's what they're treating it as, their flip
Right.
side. They're
Yeah.
the traitor to the cause, etc. Even though no matter what the Republicans did in this case, she was going to get confirmed. So it's really just an aesthetic argument, or I guess it's performative.
Right, and in similar ways to like the way Democrats, even though they knew they weren't going to try to fully stop certain Supreme Court justices from getting approved under the Trump administration, but you need to do something that shows a fight. So
Right.
that's all I'll say on that.
I mean, Dianne Feinstein missed that memo, but regardless, she misses a lot of memos.
She gets some of them and then misses them later.
Yeah, but she's missing them all in her heart and in her mind. Every memo's missed to Dianne. But let's turn to this Biden clip here. So, Biden spoke to union members yesterday. I believe this is the North America Building Trades Union here. And he addressed the Amazon unionization effort and the successful vote, although there's still a ways to go, in Staten Island. And he made a pretty broad pronouncement and said, watch out, Amazon, essentially. Let's watch.
That's what unions are about, in my view, about providing dignity and respect for people who bust their neck. That's why I created the White House Task Force on Worker Organization Empowerment, to make sure the choice to join a union belongs to workers alone. And by the way, Amazon, here we come. Watch.
Like, I mean, that's Biden at his best, honestly.
And listen to the roar of that audience. I mean, obviously, the National Building Trades Union's going to be excited about stuff like that, but that is stuff that is hard for politicians to just walk away from, and Democrats like love to walk away from this stuff. But if there's enough of that energy, exactly, like that, it's impossible, and they get caught up in the moment. And we should applaud Joe Biden. And if he really wants to help out Amazon workers, he can do what Chris Small said, which is pass the PRO Act.
Right. Well, and then so those are the caveats there, right? He made very little effort to pressure Manchin. I mean, it's not just Manchin and Sinema. It's going to be like guys like Mark Warner, even maybe more vociferously, who are opposed to the PRO Act.
But your senators, Joe.
Yeah, he did not pressure them adequately. He did not pressure those same senators adequately on Build Back Better, which would have included some of the PRO Act elements. So he failed in that regard. But that doesn't mean that this doesn't have value. And I think it's stark to compare Jay Carney, former Obama press secretary, is one of the top executives at Amazon right now. By the way, his cover photo on Twitter is of him hugging Biden. It's like not subtle at all. And he hasn't tweeted since the Amazon union vote that sided in favor of the union. He's down bad.
I mean, a lot of just horrible people, alumni of the Obama administration. And better keep those guys quiet.
It shows progress, and it also shines light on the strength of Biden's, which was that he always did fashion himself as like a pro-union guy, maybe more in aesthetic than in actual practice. But again, I want to reiterate that this does have value, and I know it's not tangible, and I know it's not the PRO Act, but like there was rumblings that Biden had resentment towards kind of the Harvard intelligentsia elites that Obama had stacked his administration with. And he wants to be more of the regular Joe, the guy that takes the train, the guy that supports unions. And so when he's off the cuff like this, being pro-union, I think that as a we have to mark that as progress, especially in comparison to what the Obama administration fashioned themselves as. Did Obama say the word worker once? I mean, I'm sure he did, but it was not an emphasis.
Yeah, and it blows out future and even past excuses that politicians gave for not showing up for workers. So and putting them, rhetorically delivering for them at least. And there's no excuses not to stay silent during fights like this.
Right. So I was happy to see that, but some people were not happy to see that. Let's first start with Chuck Todd, who was, I believe, on MSNBC, or was it NBC? You guys have it? Yeah, they were airing this speech, and and when Biden began to talk about workers and unions, Chuck Todd was like, "This is not interesting. This is not about Ukraine. So thing doesn't go boom, and I don't care."
I want to talk about what I'm here today to talk about. You women are men and the American union movement. Remember.
Okay, pause it for a sec. Look at the chirons beneath this. It's about Kyiv, and this war could continue for a long time. He is speaking
against the war against the capitalists by the laborers.
What? Maybe it's accurate. You're right. You're right. Except it'll be it's because he briefly talks about Ukraine here, and that's clearly the only thing that MSNBC cares about. Keep going.
Remember, when the Fair Labor Standards
We wanted to
Act
bring
was
you the
first
top
passed,
of those
everybody said,
remarks on
"How
Chuck
do you
Todd
do
here
this?"
at Meet the Press Daily. We wanted to bring you the top of those remarks. We knew they were going to be about the latest decision by the U.S. government and Biden administration to announce some new sanctions on Russia. The rest of his speech, it is a union event. It is obviously not expected to be about Russian sanctions. Bring you any news. If it happens, you can go find the speech online if you would like. The new sanctions, in coordination with the G7 and EU, are part of the Biden administration's.
Is that not unbelievable? Like,
it's like he's apologizing to the executives. Like, why are we running Joe Biden at a union event?
Yes.
It's like, well, he was doing something about Ukraine, guys. Please don't. Yeah.
Right. Please. I mean, then we'll get back to the normal coverage of and again, it's worthwhile, of course, to cover Ukraine. But that's I mean, again, I will bring up my infamous laundry room, which always has CNN on. That's all is being discussed. That's it. And if there's anything that challenges capitalists, if there's anything that challenges capital, and Biden is like addressing this wide unionization effort throughout the country where workers are understanding the value of their labor. That's not sexy. That's actually very scary for the MSNBC executives. So let's cut away. But Psaki was also feeling the heat here too, because as I mentioned earlier, Biden is still cozy with some of the not cozy, wants to maintain the relationships with some of these people in the Biden or the Obama administration, his former colleagues in that way. And Jay Carney, top executive there, Amazon and big tech during the Democratic primary also was financially much more behind Biden than any of the other candidates. So here's Jen Psaki trying to walk back one of the very good Biden improv statements, but she's got to bring up the rear guard for industry here.
Can I ask, President Biden today told union members, Amazon, here we come. Was he endorsing the efforts of workers to unionize Amazon facilities?
What he was not doing is sending a message that he or the U.S. government would be directly involved in any of these efforts or take any direct action. What he was conveying is that is his longtime support for collective bargaining, for the rights of workers to organize, and their decision to do exactly that in this case, something that he has long supported broadly over the course of his career.
Which, if she wasn't trying to be like, we're not targeting Amazon specifically, that wouldn't be contradictory to what he said, because when he said Amazon, here we come, he's talking about unionization. He does support if he supports collective bargaining, he supports it in Amazon's case specifically, and it's the most high profile one that's out there right now. But at the same time, she's got to just calm the waters a bit, and so the Amazon doesn't give Biden the stern phone call.
Yeah, this is what it looks like to try to ride two horses at once and see if the Democratic Party can actually do it. Probably not.
Right. But
you got to pick a side. You got to
yes.
ultimately, and Joe Biden picked a side, and it is like classic Joe, right? I remember the this is a big fucking deal thing when he said it was said about healthcare, and like that was cool. But the thing that was cool about that wasn't like Obamacare. It was like that the Democrats for once were proud of delivering like
Yeah.
sort of public goods to people, and it didn't. It turned out to be an aberration, sort of. But yeah, like I'm very happy Joe did that, and I hope Uncle Joe does more of that stuff.
Yes. Again, and then just to wrap this up, his off the cuff stuff is mostly bad, right? He's during the primary yelling at immigration activists for demanding more from him, for example. But there is this one instinct of his that's been right for a while, and it's to support, at least rhetorically, workers here. So again, more of this, and
Pass the PRO Act.
Yeah, pass the PRO Act. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we will be joined by Luke Savage, writer at Jacobin and author of the new book, which I have right here, The Dead Center: Reflections on Liberalism and Democracy After the End of History. Be right back. We are back, and we are joined by friend of the show, Luke Savage, writer for Jacobin Magazine and author of The Dead Center: Reflections on Liberalism and Democracy After the End of History. Luke, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you, Emma. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, good to see you too. So when does the book come out? Because I've gotten a special sneak peek, but I want the general public to know when they can finally get your book.
That's a good question. I wish I had a real answer, more precise than soon, I hope. But
okay.
It's still available for pre-order, and if you pre-order, you'll get 15% off. I'm gonna once I know, I'll announce on Twitter, and hopefully soon, April or May.
I put you on the spot. I just want so everybody just pre-order it. That's probably the safest bet in this situation. But anyway, thanks so much for being here. I've always loved your writing, and what's great about your book is that it's just a collection of your writing and some of your essays and reflections on politics from when you were born. You say in 1989, which is you said that, right? That's the right date? Yeah, that's the perfect date to demarcate, that period of time when we're talking about the end of history and then moving forward. The Obama election, which was this formative experience for a lot of people, myself included. I was born in '94, so big deal. But you voted in the Obama election, right?
Well, I'm not actually eligible to vote in American elections because I'm not an American citizen. But what I can tell you is, I mean, I was in my first year of university at the time, and this was at the University of Toronto, and so I wasn't even in the United States, and there was absolute euphoria up here. There were people, you know, I was watching it in my dorm's common room, and people had kind of tears streaming down their faces, and then everybody sort of spontaneously streamed out into the quad, and you know, we're hugging and kind of punching the air and stuff like that. So I mean, I think I bring it up, I think, just because it really gives a sense of how significant that was to so many people. You know, especially given that, you know, this wasn't Berkeley, this wasn't NYU, this was a campus in Canada. I mean, that's how kind of far the Obama euphoria spread.
That was a dumb question, because you do have this whole chapter on Canada, and I want to dive into that as well. But I guess we can talk there in terms, or start there with the concept of the end of history, and then move into the Obama election. For people who might not know, what is that concept, and why did you make it one of the central points of your book?
Sure. Okay. I mean, so The End of History is the title, or part of a title, of a book by Francis Fukuyama. And it kind of, that book famously posited, came out in the 90s, famously posited liberalism, kind of liberal democratic institutions, as the sort of end point of human history. So, you know, it's to be very general about it. The suggestion was that we've arrived at this situation where most societies either are, or can tend to be, or are moving towards, you know, liberal democratic institutions, you know, a kind of market economy, that sort of thing. And it's significant for a few reasons. I mean, I think, you know, every era in some way thinks it's special, right? Every era has a sense of its own exceptionalism. I think the era in which both you and I are born was exceptional in its exceptionalism, if I can put it that way. I mean, it's quite a thing to for there to be a pervasive sense, right? This wasn't just in the book. This was, you know, Fukuyama was articulating something that was really in the air at the time. It was really informing politics, particularly in the Anglo-American world, but also beyond. This belief that, you know, really there were no alternatives to this. You know, sort of channeling Margaret Thatcher's famous phrase, right? There is no alternative. So from now on, politics is going to be contested within this much narrower set of parameters than it had been in the 20th century, where, of course, you know, you had liberalism, but you also had all of these challenges to liberalism. Obviously, the communist challenge, the fascist challenge as well. And I think also it's important to add the social democratic challenge as well, which you saw in European countries and elsewhere. So that's a very truncated kind of answer to your question. But I think all of this is significant because even today, there really is still a belief that a lot of people have that there really isn't an alternative that is possible or can really even be imagined to the present that we currently live in. And I think that's still a very significant influence, the kind of an ambient influence that exerts on our politics and on really all of our social and cultural discourse as well.
So yeah, what's your sense of how that I mean, it's the myth that capitalism has won forever and it's going to be naturalized as the only system, and also, you know, neoliberal politics, there's really very little alternatives to it. Social democracies that's reserved for tiny countries, maybe in Northern Europe, but we're not going to promote those policies among the broader population in bigger capitalist countries like the US. Like, how did an entire generation of politicians all align along that same religious belief in those ideas? Because that's a huge force of groupthink that it's hard to even fathom how, like, you know, it just became so unchallengeable in such a short period of time.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, if you go back 30 years before the so-called end of history, I mean, a lot of people felt the same thing, including many conservatives, by the way, I think had the same sense of kind of Keynesian social democracy and the welfare state that emerged in Europe and elsewhere after the Second World War, people felt that that was an impregnable consensus, and that really you could only make kind of tweaks within it. You could have a sort of conservative version of it, or you could have a version that maybe trended towards some kind of socialism, but there was nothing that could, no horizon that could be really seen beyond it. What happened in the 90s, I think, is it's complicated because, you use the word religious, and I think that's the right word. There's a kind of really a secular theology almost that's developed in the 1990s around liberal democratic capitalism. And the story of how that comes about, I think, is complicated. There's in kind of the macro sense, you have the obvious seismic event of the fall of the Soviet Union, and also preceding that, really the just the clear failure and dysfunction of what the Soviet model had become to deliver anything. The kind of final years of the Soviet Union especially are just characterized by such dysfunction, and also, decrepit leadership that's unable to hang on to power and all that kind of thing. So that's one thing. I think another factor, and this can't really be overlooked either, although it's a more boring answer in some ways, is in the countries where neoliberalism is most potent and where it develops, I think, most strongly, first among conservatives, but then also is taken up by liberals, in some cases in an even more fanatical way. So I'm thinking about Britain and America especially. There's a specific context, which is that in the United States, the Liberal Party and kind of the New Deal consensus, that being the Democrats, and then in Britain, the Labour Party, really suffered defeats throughout the 1980s, unlike anything that they'd suffered before. There are these big Reagan landslides, and in the UK, the Labour Party loses 4 general elections between 1979 and 1992, and at the same time, the institutions that had kind of buttressed, the post-war settlement in these countries, so big working class institutions, trade unions built at least partly around strong manufacturing, that kind of thing. Those institutions are completely battered. So there's no longer kind of the popular and institutional foundation that there had been before. And so there's a complicated interplay of kind of ideas and material factors here. But by the time you get to the 1990s, I think I'll just turn to the British example because I don't want to be too exhaustive here. By the time you get to Tony Blair in 97, there's really nothing left in Labour's program that has anything to do with kind of, social democracy, really. They're proudly boasting about how they're going to spend the exact same amount as the Tories. But people were so fed up with 18 years of conservative rule and so kind of on the hunt for some kind of novelty. Blair was able to present himself as this kind of transformational leader, and in doing so, he was able to kind of channel a lot of the kind of zeitgeist in the air about the end of history that we've been talking about. So it's a big question, but I guess that's a sketch of an answer.
Right. And I think, I've seen people compare, Clinton and Blair a bit more, but to the presentation of a transformational figure but at the same time only upholding the same structures is a lot more akin to Obama in a sense, right? Because again, I was born in 94. It's hard for me to say, but the transformational nature of Obama's presidency or his candidacy, I think, was more at the forefront, and the results are quite similar.
Absolutely. So I think it's important to distinguish between the period we just talked about and kind of the period that came after it with Obama, because of course and obviously other figures elsewhere as well, because the kind of first wave of the end of history, if you want, is actually a lot of enthusiasm around this stuff. The figures like Blair, I think, and Clinton as well, they really are and were quite genuine ideologues. They really believed in this stuff. It had a certain intellectual credibility, liberal democratic capitalism at the time. There was a lot of triumphalism about kind of what it was going to yield and what a sort of US-led global order was going to yield in terms of the spread of democracy and things like that. I think by the time you get to 2008, when Obama's elected, that's much less credible as a rendering of things, right? You've had 9/11,
Iraq War, right? And like, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a quite short. That's an 18-year near or 20-year shelf life for the status of the end quo of the end of history. It's
Absolutely.
not a long end.
That's right. And I mean, famously, one of my favorite kind of slogans to come out of Britain in this period was that, New Labour said they were going to end boom and bust. Well, the economic part of this settlement, I mean, nail in the coffin for it in many ways, at least in terms of its credibility, was the financial crash, which of course preceded Obama's rise as well. I mean, so when you get to Obama, Obama, I think he's a really important figure to understand, and I hope, in the near future to be able to say a lot more about him. I still think he is in some ways the most important figure to understanding kind of the centrist liberal project and where it's going to continue to try to go moving forward. Because as you said, he was somebody who was, uniquely gifted at presenting a kind of small c conservative view of the world, a sort of managerial and non-transformative and actually anti-transformative view of the world, but presenting it with kind of such style and vigor and dynamism, and with such kind of a remarkable gift to weave together political narratives that huge numbers of people of different political persuasions found compelling. He's really the virtuoso of that style, which is now, has since become kind of the house style of liberals and of American liberals in particular. The longest section of the book, the longest essay in the book is the essay on Obama. And then the longest section in the book consists of essays dealing with various kind of liberal figures, many of whom were candidates in the 2020 Democratic primaries.
Right, and you cite a passage that the phrase from Obama, "I was from everywhere and nowhere at once." I mean, what do you think that says about him as a figure?
I mean, it's extraordinary. If you've read as much of Obama's writing as I have, and I've read all three of his kind of memoir. I'm not sure if there are other. I think that's kind of his whole corpus. He had Dreams from My Father in the 90s, The Audacity of Hope, and then volume 1, this kind of tombstone of a book. It's only volume 1 of his memoirs, A Promised Land. And I mean, you notice two things. The first is that, Obama, I don't think these are not ghostwritten books. So this is not, this is not like a John Kerry or Hillary Clinton who pays somebody $1 million or whatever it is to, ghostwrite them a book that they sort of, serve on the writing of in an advisory capacity or something like that. Obama's consciously thought about this style, and you notice first that he's doing that. He's a cut above. He's better at this than a Hillary Clinton or a John Kerry or the people that they pay to write their words for them. That's the first thing. The second thing you notice is that he's pretty much doing the same thing over and over again. So there is a kind of middle brow literary flourish that he brings to his writing. He's very dexterous at bringing in lots of different cultural references to music and films and history and all kinds of stuff. But there's a really conscious style that he's employing here, and a conscious kind of structure. And it's the same. It's kind of literary version of what his politics are, and it comes through in these where he's quite explicitly says things like, "Well, I was a platypus who consisted of many parts, many ill-fitting parts." In Dreams from My Father, you can find a passage where he's talking about how he had statues of Buddha at home, and his family would take him to the Shinto shrine and also the mosque. And I think it was Matt Taibbi who back in 2007 called Obama an ideological universalist, and that really is consciously what he's trying to do. He's trying to make his autobiography a sort of carte blanche onto which all of history and culture is in some way inscribed, and every political persuasion is inscribed. And that's both what makes him a very compelling figure, but also what makes him, I think, ultimately a pretty conservative figure, because the parts of Obama's book and the kind of parts of his presidency where he was forced, I think, to take kind of clear ideological positions, he always takes the conservative position. That's just what his nature is. And there's a lot of window dressing for what is fundamentally, a view of the world that is not really that distinct from a Bill or Hillary Clinton or any other number of politicians to come out of this sort of neoliberal tradition.
Except he has, he kind of brands optimism paired with, quote, moral minimalism, as you write. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so moral minimalism is a that comes out of a really fantastic piece of writing, an essay Corey Robin published in Dissent, where he read through all the memoirs that had come out of various former Obama staffers, and by moral minimalism he meant that there was Obama frequently, he has this kind of grand soaring rhetoric, but if you kind of really nail down the things he talks about, there's a real smallness to them. It's all about meetings at kitchen tables, these kind of small individual gestures, small individual acts, and things like that. Those have always been a big part of his kind of rhetorical style, and he's actually very suspicious of kind of grander morality in politics of the kind you might associate with someone like Bernie Sanders. Right, exactly. Yeah, who makes, whose whole style is premised on very much the opposite of Obama, where he makes these very direct, simple, declarative statements about, healthcare should be a right, not a privilege, et cetera.
Right. I mean, and it just is a very succinct way to describe him. It's also depressing because, as you write, I mean, and I don't want to focus too much on Obama here, but that was your longest section, as you say, and it's really great. I'd really, when it does come out or pre-order it, and I'd encourage everybody to read it. That was like my formative political experience. I don't know about you, but for me, I was one of those. I was a 14-year-old at the time, crying when he got elected. I mean, that was really what brought me into and got me invested in politics, and so. I think we're not going to fully be able to grasp what the effects of that are on a generation that was, like with Tony Blair in the late 90s, looking for an alternative to what we saw, especially because the disaster of the Bush administration was even more truncated and acute, like because it was within those 8 years as opposed to the long reign of conservatives in the UK. It was even more acute, and there was the economic collapse that immediately followed, but also the two wars that exhausted Americans to a degree.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we have to be careful in introspective in thinking about how our politics are formed. I think that's really important, and because if the sources of your politics are sort of purely psychological and purely kind of just situation based in whatever context you come out of, I think there are limits to that. But there's no getting around the fact that the experience of the millennial generation in particular, on so many things, our experience of the economy, I think, as well. But in terms of in relation to politics, I mean, the experience of people of our generation really is that we've lived through this kind of teeter-totter of disastrous. I mean, it's kind of a chicken the egg thing. You can begin the story in either place, but let's begin it in the Bush era of this disastrous, incompetent right-wing administration, and then that's replaced by a liberal administration that people are at least briefly very excited about, which then fails to deliver on what a lot of people thought it was going to, helps produce the conditions, quite directly for the next incompetent right-wing administration that's worse, and then, as we saw in 2016 and 2020, works to defeat alternatives to itself in a way which only lays the groundwork further for, I mean, we're in 2022, so I'm thinking about the almost inevitable Trump candidacy in 2024. And so that's the cycle you've lived through. And if that's what your political experience has been, I suppose there are a couple conclusions you could draw from it. I mean, one is that you can become, you can just disengage from politics, and I think that's what a lot of people have done. But another is, particularly if you were raised in a kind of liberalish milieu, is you can just conclude that liberalism doesn't actually offer the tools. It's not equipped intellectually or politically, to deliver and, forget transformation of the world, even kind of modest egalitarian reform of the world. And so you can look to alternatives. And I think in, the past 5 or 6 years, especially, and, I guess to an extent as well after the financial crisis with Occupy Wall Street and things like that, that's what a lot of people have been doing. And that's one of the main reasons why there's been this huge, kind of resurgence, or I'm not even sure if to call it a resurgence. It's just a surgence of kind of interest, in democratic socialism.
Your book also analyzes and writes about some of like the cultural elements that underpin the mid 2000s that I think primed the country for a candidate like Obama, but also was a way of coping through the Bush administration. Things like The Daily Show or the fantasy of the West Wing. Those are liberal. That's liberal fanfic, but that's my surface level analysis. I mean, what did you take from looking at these cultural elements and extrapolating them onto the larger political atmosphere?
Yeah, so I mean, again, there's no getting around the fact that I was born in the late 1980s, and so like you, a lot of my formative cultural kind of artifacts were things. It was the liberalism of the Bush era, right? It was. There's too many things to list, but Jon Stewart and the West Wing were hugely influential on a lot of things at that time, and especially in the case of the latter, I think since as well. So, I mean, there is an essay on Jon Stewart in the book. It's about his movie, I think, that came out in 2020 or 2021, his already forgotten, probably scarcely remembered film, Irresistible, which kind of channels sort of the good intentions of Jon Stewart and also his limitations. You don't need to see the movie, just buy the book and read the essay. When it comes to the West Wing, I mean, I'm a broken record talking about this, but I wrote the essay on the West Wing in 2017, and at the time, I remember thinking that the show, better than anything else, articulated and channeled a certain kind of liberal view of the world that especially came out during the Obama era. I think I've actually kind of radicalized on that view a little bit. I actually think the West Wing played an active role in shaping that view, and you really see it in the memoirs of people that worked in the Obama White House, where they're all citing this show. I mean, there was a particular type of Ivy League 20-year-old or something who in 2007 went to go work for this junior senator from Illinois who was running this really exciting campaign, and their only political education was the West Wing. So, when they get to the White House, they don't think, oh, I'm in the White House, we're running the country now. They think, oh, wow, I'm on the set of my favorite show, and there's so much in the West Wing that you still see manifest in how, liberals view the world. This idea that you can fix everything with a speech, that bipartisanship is not a means to an end, that it's an end in itself. And also just the conservatism of that show is really striking. The fact that this is kind of the liberal fantasy of politics, in the Clinton, Bush, and Obama eras, and they don't really pass anything. I mean, I think their most significant legislative achievement is cutting Social Security in an episode where you're supposed to celebrate that. They put a far-right justice on the Supreme Court because in exchange they get a liberal, and the staff of the West Wing find these two lawyers, kind of their banter, they find it charming, and they think, wouldn't that be great? There's a subtext of the West Wing that so much of what matters in politics to liberals is just the way they look and the way they make us feel. And so so it's not about ideology really, or that's secondary. It's not about, what a Democratic administration actually achieves or passes in terms of legislation. It's all about these moments that make us feel good. The West Wing has multiple.
It's
Obama. It's Obama. It's late night TV, right? It's again back to Jon Stewart. It's late night TV and comedians epically owning Fox News, epically owning the right. And obviously, if you could just defeat the right by owning them with facts and logic, Donald Trump never would have been elected. In the world of the West Wing, Bartlett wins a debate against a Republican governor who's challenging him for the presidency. by just shutting him, down kind of pedantically in the opening, opening statement. And politics doesn't work that way, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, we could go. I could talk about that for hours, but you
This
did
is
bring
a
up
real
some.
rabbit hole. Yeah.
Yeah, and you talk about the Supreme Court justice thing. I mean, that's kind of where we are in terms of Democratic opposition. I mean, they've caught up recently, but to the Supreme Court picks, which brings me to one of your other essays, Why Liberals Pretend They Have No Power. We'll get people who write into the show or who call in and say, why do you guys, Sam and I, why do we cover Democrats as incompetent or bad at their jobs as opposed to losing on purpose? I think losing on purpose is too conspiratorial and not like accurate, but they are incredibly incompetent, but they're also incentivized, they're feckless by design, and their incentives are all wrong. Curious about your take or what you'd say if you were, here and we during the call portion of the show and we got one of those calls.
Yeah, I mean, so I would agree. I mean, it depends on what somebody means by they're losing on purpose. I mean, I think there is a sense in which the incentive structures for a lot of kind of senior people, the consultant class that kind of underwrites much of what happens in the Democratic leadership, a lot of the Democratic leaders themselves, right? A lot of these people are exorbitantly rich. Even if you lose your seat or whatever in a midterm, there's going to be some, white collar legal firm, some kind of consultancy you can go to, where you might have a little bit of lost honor because you lost an election to some Yosemite Sam or something, but like right. you're not gonna suffer. The stakes are kind of low for you. So in that sense, I kind of buy the idea that they're in that sense, maybe Democrats are quote unquote losing on purpose, or at least they're ambivalent about the possibility of losing in some cases. I mean, that essay, kind of dealt with this strange phenomenon of liberals actually in positions of power, kind of acting as if they have no power, which is something you really saw in the Trump era. So I think the occasion for that essay was Nancy Pelosi calling Donald Trump a third world dictator or something. This was just ahead of the 2020 election, I think. And then, she was asked, well, are you going to shut down the government to stop, some appointment he's going to make or something? And she said, oh no, of course we can't do that. Can't do anything. And that's a theme, a kind of dissonance, if you want, that runs right through the Trump era, where Democrats were, on the one hand, the kind of house rhetoric of liberalism for 4 years, and even before that during Trump's candidacy, was this is a state of emergency. We're gonna have the Fourth Reich in America. This is unlike anything we've ever seen. And then what did Democrats do? Well, they approved a lot of his appointments. They kept the regular functioning of government as it was. You had absurd moments like when I think Trump's first State of the Union, Van Jones went on TV after and was celebrating, some part of Trump's speech where he addressed a widow in a recent, someone who'd been killed in a recent, raid or something. I mean, just there was just a clear commitment to kind of status quoism and to all of the kind of normal etiquette of American politics, even as there was all this stuff about how there was a state of exception. You see the same thing on all kinds of issues, on climate change, where you can have like the governor of California tweet, climate change is real. Someone needs to do something about it. And it's like, yeah, if only there were some executive in charge of the world's fifth largest economy, But
process. I mean, we got to do commit to process or commit to procedure. It's so silly.
Right. And that's related to this, because there is, and again, I hate to keep bringing up the West Wing, but there is almost a kind of fantasy of impotence here that you see channeled in that show, where and of course there are material reasons for this and ideological reasons as well. But the House style of liberalism today really is, you make these sweeping statements about how bad everything is, how precarious everything is, how dangerous everything is. And then you kind of, at the same time, throw up your hands and you say, well, we can't do anything about it. I mean, we only have 50 seats in the Senate, or we don't have the courts, or Fox News was mean to us. And so there's a belief that a belief and almost a celebration, in fact, I think, of these impediments to doing anything. In addition
as
to
morally
actually
righteous in and of themselves, the impediments are
That's right.
democracy, right? Which is a
That's right.
complete, yeah. It's still it's very self-serving.
That's right. And I'll just bring up. I don't want to make my answer too long-winded here, but I mean, I'll just bring up one thing that I think is very telling, that is quite exemplary of this, which was something Biden actually said in 2019 when he was running for president, where he said something to the effect of, "It's good when you don't have unified party control of the U.S. government." So this is something Biden's saying while he's running for president to be a Democratic president. He's saying it's good when no party has too much power. So in, the kind of centrist worldview of someone like Biden, the fantasy is that you have to deal with Mitch McConnell. And I think that's really telling. And it's related, it's importantly also not something you see on the right? You'd never hear Mitch McConnell or Donald Trump say that.
There'll be the opposition party to oppose the Democrats. And Sam said this, I think, yesterday. Democrats have completely disengaged from being an opposition party. That's
absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, Luke Savage, writer for Jacobin Magazine, author of The Dead Center, Reflections on Liberalism and Democracy After the End of History. You can pre-order it now. Luke, thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Emma. Pleasure.
Of course. All right, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to be joined by congressional candidate running in New York's 12th district, Rana Abdelhamid. We'll be right back. We are back, and we are joined by Rana Abdelhamid, congressional candidate running in New York's 12th district. Rana, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful to be in conversation.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you. You are a Justice Democrat. You're a progressive running to challenge Carolyn Maloney here right in our backyard in a district that both encompasses the western part of Queens, but the Upper East Side. And, it's not hard to guess where Carolyn Maloney lives.
Right, exactly. It's really a tale of two districts. It's one of the most unequal districts in the country, one of the most unequal places in the world.
Right. And there are other parts of New York, parts of Brooklyn, Greenpoint that are in this district, but it's one of those bizarrely drawn districts. But I mean, that also makes for a campaign. I don't know. I'm curious how you're approaching it. You have to appeal to a bunch of different people. It seems though like Maloney has trended more towards representing the wealthier interests in the city and in the district, and your approach has been a bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually was born and raised in Queens. I'm from this district, raised in this district. Representative Maloney obviously has been in office for close to 3 decades now, and her focus has really been on certain parts of this district for so long. And she has not engaged with the parts of Queens, parts of Brooklyn, and parts of Manhattan that have not been her natural base and the wealthiest parts of the district. In fact, with the new lines that were drawn, she was actually quite public in stating that she didn't want any part of Queens or any part of Brooklyn in her district, which is, quite hard to hear your own representative say that she doesn't want to represent you anymore, and then actually see like parts of Queens and parts of Brooklyn being cut out. And so much of this race has been about making sure that the communities that have not been centered in our electoral process are finally feeling like they're being heard and feeling like we're able to build political power in collective.
So you grew up in Astoria, you grew up in Queens. I mean, right now, Astoria, Western Queens in particular, is a ground zero for gentrification in the city. I mean, I'm here in Brooklyn, so I know it intimately. And in terms of just these high rises being built all around us, I mean, what would you do as representative to combat that? And I guess maybe we could start first with your personal experience with that kind of gentrification.
Yeah, and so it's really heartbreaking because when people think of Astoria in the context of like housing justice or movement work, it's always like Astoria's gone. Like, people almost give up on it because gentrification has been happening for a really long time. I mean, my family, rising rent costs impacted our housing situation maybe like 15 years ago when I was just a teenager. We were pushed out of our home. My family ran a small business here in Astoria, off of Broadway in Queens. And, I really saw my parents struggle to keep our small business alive. And eventually, because of rising rent costs, we lost our small business and lost our livelihood, right? And it was a very difficult time. And even just being in Astoria, walking around, so much of it has changed. West Queens, so much of it has changed because of the luxury developments that are constantly going up, despite the incredible organizing that has been happening. And so for me, coming to this race is so much about an understanding that we need systems-based change, systemic change to fight for housing justice across the city. West Queens is also home to the largest public housing unit in all of North America. And when people think about New York 12, people do not think about the fact that we are home to Queensbridge. And so we are running on a housing justice platform, and we're centering this reality of gentrification, lack of funding for public housing as a key part of our platform.
Yeah, I'm hoping you can expand on that a little bit because Eric Adams just broke up a houseless encampment and then went to then he went to that party. I mean, might have not been on the same day. I'm hung up on that because it's such a stark contrast.
I saw that too. I was like,
yeah, right. And it's just a credit card party. We have not in this country emphasized public housing from a federal level. It's been decades, I believe, since there's been any funding. But even here in the city, as a way to not just combat houselessness, but make sure that gentrification is not the problem that it is. What would you do as the representative of New York 14 to make sure that public housing is not only maintained, but that it's increased in its presence here in the city?
Yeah, as a representative for New York District 12, what's really important is to see exactly what you're saying, the model for public housing as a permanent solution for the lack of affordability in the city. We know that close to 50% of renters across the city are rent burdened. We know that when we leave it up to the market in general, right, to build housing, oftentimes that housing solution looks like the luxury development that we're seeing. What we need at a federal level is we need a national rent control. So we're increasing the number of units that are rent controlled in the city. What we need is we need to fully fund our public housing so people aren't having to live with mold or having to live in the middle of the winter in cold because there isn't a proper heating system in their building, or having to deal with the reality of climate crisis in their buildings because of lack of proper infrastructure. And we need to expand the number of public housing that exists in the city. There's real opportunity for us to do this. We know that there are so many vacant units across the city that are not being used, and the very dehumanizing, criminalizing approaches that current Mayor Adams is leveraging to actually address some of these challenges, while he's simultaneously proposing a budget that defunds homelessness services by $600 million, shows that we aren't really caring to address this cause and address these issues at its root cause of the issue, but rather just, you know, trying to put a Band-Aid solution over it to kind of push it under the rug.
I mean, I feel like there's a certain section of wealthy people in the city that would just rather not see certain people. They just rather them not be out of sight, out of mind, as opposed to actually dealing with the problem. So your platform's very progressive, Green New Deal, Medicare for all. I mean, what, I guess, motivated you to run, and how do you identify yourself as a progressive, as a democratic socialist? I mean, would you be a part of the squad if you were elected to Congress? I mean, how do you perceive your candidacy as it fits into like this larger leftist surge of candidates that we've seen over the past few years?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I always say, you know, is I'm a community organizer. I'm a movement person. I come from organizing in New York City since I was a public high school student. Like, that has always been my focus. I'm a self-defense instructor. I'm a healing justice facilitator. I came to this work as a working class person. I came to this work as a survivor of a hate-based attack, as a Muslim woman. And what I'm going to be focused on in my tenure as a representative, as someone who's organizing electorally, is making sure that my North Star is always the communities that are organizing across New York City, that have been left behind by electoral politics, working class families, people of color, public housing tenants, Section 8 tenants, and progressive people across the district who really care to make New York City a place where everyone can survive and everyone can thrive, because that's not the city that we exist in right now.
Right. And you mentioned your activism there. You have a nonprofit that's worked in the gender violence space. Can you talk a little bit about your work in that area, and how that made you who you are today, your candidacy, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a survivor of a hate-based attack. I started a nonprofit that's focused on building safety and power for women and non-binary people across the country and across the globe. We do self-defense training, we do healing justice training, and doing that work really showed me so many things. I mean, when people talk about the shelter system, that work always reminds me of the reality that our shelter system is so overwhelmed, right? That in the middle of the pandemic, people who are survivors of domestic violence and gender-based violence were having to isolate with their abusers because they had no other option. They had no other place to go because of the reality of our housing crisis in this city. And so that, in so many ways, that work has shown me that our communities have the power to keep ourselves safe, that if we invest in civil society and organizations, if we invest in trauma-informed response, and if we invest in proper anti-racism education, our communities will be safe. And if we actually address these issues from an anti-poverty lens and a lens that is empathetic and humane, that we would really have a city that could thrive. And so that is a lot of what the work has shown me.
And lastly, I was hoping you could touch a little bit on teachers' unions in general, but nationally we're seeing such an attack on education. It's a twofer for Republicans. They get to attack gay people and trans people. And at the same time, they can undercut teachers by basically threatening them. If you decide to teach about the gay agenda in classrooms, you could be ousted. But particular to New York City, and you know, I'm from Jersey too. Like there were a lot of charter schools, and there was a lot of democratic undercutting of teachers' unions. I mean, there's the bigoted, insane ways the right does it, but there are ways that Democrats who, under the guise of school choice, have undercut both public education and teachers as well. How would you approach that as a representative in regards to charter schools and also supporting teachers unions as well?
Yeah, I'm a huge supporter of New York City public schools, as someone who is a graduate of New York City public schools, as someone who had the opportunity to conduct self-defense and safety programming over the past couple of years in New York City public schools. And I know that, you know, New York City public schools are also severely segregated. There's a lack of funding. We need to expand Title I funding. We need to make sure that teachers have the resources that they need. And we need to move away from this system that is so overwhelmingly reliant reliant on standardized testing, right? And makes it so difficult for teachers to actually do their jobs. And also the reality is right now, especially within the context of the pandemic, within the context of this current political climate, so many students and so many teachers are severely overwhelmed from a mental health perspective. And we need to invest in counselors. We need to divest from the school to prison pipeline. And these are all things that I would stand for at a federal level to make our schools more effective for students across the city, not just for some students who have access to things like charter schools or alternative programming to public schools, but rather really invest in our public school system.
Well, that's great. Where can people learn more about your campaign and help out in any way?
Yeah, so we're a 100% grassroots funded, grassroots powered campaign. If you're able to contribute and support, volunteer with our race, like definitely feel free to reach out at www.rana4congress.com, and we'd really appreciate your support in whatever way possible.
Awesome. We're gonna just put this on the screen here. This is your website. The Act Blue link here. We'll just pop this up right here, just so people have a visual understanding where they can go. Rana, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time today. Rana Abdelhamid, congressional candidate running in New York's 12th district, and the primary's in June, right?
Yes, June 28th.
June 28th. All right, check it out. Thanks so much, Rana.
Thank you so much.
All right, folks. With that, we are going to head into the fun half. But first, Left Reckoning. It's already happened this week. How'd it go?
Yeah, it went really well. We had Wozni Lambre, my buddy and basketball podcaster at the Ringer, on for his second Left Reckoning appearance. The first time we talked about the original formation of the NBA Players Union and the a lot of the stuff we think of as like new social justice stuff that players are doing, actually not quite so new, come to find. And last night we talked about the current era of player empowerment, sort of where NBA players are deciding that they aren't as constrained by taking whatever deals that they can and are willing to, say, like LeBron, go to Miami for less money to play with better players.
Yeah.
And what that actually means for the NBA capitalists who need to control their workers a little bit. So if you want to get a little bit of access or insight into a conversation about how exploitation works for even highly, highly paid workers, last night, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We also got deep into the Starbucks and Amazon stuff. So you can listen to that too.
I'm reminded of that Scottie Pippen contract that was so exploitative because he came from such little money and they essentially signed him on the low for like 10 years and wouldn't let him out of it. I mean, those days are a bit over in the NBA, but it's still an uphill battle.
Yeah, all the systems are just like reformed versions of those originally highly exploitative things. Like the original, I can't remember who the first basketball player was that got the exception that they didn't have to do 4 years of college basketball, but it was for that. It was a basketball player whose parents were, or mother at least, was like a literal sharecropper. And it's like, yeah, we can let this guy go earn some money professionally rather than, playing for free for some academic institution. And like it's better now. You don't have to go to 4 years of college, but there's still
in the NFL, you have to go to 3.
Right, exactly. And that's all. It's the same thing. It's all sort of labor protection.
And in the NFL, like in the NBA, when they like someone signs a $72 million contract, they're getting $72 million. In the NFL, it's even worse because like it's all hidden. It's only the guaranteed money, and even if you have like a 5-year contract, it's really only 2 or 3, and it's just the guaranteed money.
I did not know though that second round draft picks in the NBA, that those contracts are not guaranteed.
Right.
Which I found out tonight or last night. So yeah.
Yeah, I know that in the context of our boy Mitchell Robinson, Bradley. But anyway, let's that sounds awesome. Let's bring in oh wait, we're still waiting for Binder, but we got all right, let's bring in Brandon. Brandon, hello.
Hello, Emma. How's it going?
It's going all right. What's happening over on the discourse?
We put out an episode on the Patreon last week regarding the Ukraine situation update, and we'll be recording again this weekend. So ideally, we'll have another one out this Monday. But yeah, I don't know what we're going to be talking about yet because the news hasn't happened yet.
Right. That's typically how it goes. All right. Well, definitely check out Doomed. Check out
Scam Economy.
Scam
Scam economy. Scams are
Yes.
prolific now. I mean, or
They are.
prodigious.
I mean, it's coming to
Both.
Starbucks to help, protect that. Like, hey, you want a union, but what if got a nice little lazy ape here?
I think Star Trek is getting into NFTs too. They're doing like their own little NFT promotional material.
I was really happy.
I hear Binder now. We have Binder. Well, now we don't need to just promote his show. He can do it for himself. There he is.
Mm-hmm.
We were saying no. I was going to make a snarky comment. Go ahead.
I was too, but I'm still going to do it. I was going to say, in a time of scams, we need you now more than ever.
Why, thank you. Well, tonight, 9 p.m. on Scam Economy, youtube.com/MattBinder, and it'll be up on Apple Podcasts, etc. Scameconomy.com. I will be talking with Liana Firsterai, who is a climate and environmental journalist. And we basically break down, you might have seen this recent report about how Bitcoin is actually going to save us all because Exxon is selling gas that basically leaks out into the atmosphere to Bitcoin mining operations. And the claim from the Bitcoin communities are, this is great. They're going green, solving the issue. Well, not quite, and you'll find out all about gas flaring. It's a very educational episode tonight at 9 p.m. Scameconomy.com, youtube.com/MattBinder, and also on Doomed on Tuesday night, and it's via podcast too at doomedcast.com. I spoke with Dr. Eric Osgood. He is a doctor who I previously had on, who talked with me about ivermectin previously when this was all going, when everyone was going crazy for ivermectin on the right. People were taking horse paste. And there was basically this new study that came out that once and for all pretty much concluded that ivermectin, not a treatment for COVID-19. And, he came on to discuss that and what the details about that and how, people on the right and anti-vaxxers are still trying to push it. It was an interesting episode. Doomcast.com, youtube.com/MattBinder.
Awesome. All right.
And Eric's a good source on that. I mean, we had him on TMBS back before the vaccines were out, I hasten to add. And he was a doctor who thought that there might be some plausibility to ivermectin as a solution. Now, I hasten to add again that we were talked about this on TMBS before there was vaccines that it would preclude for people taking, and not as an alternative vaccines, but as like maybe something doctors should look into as a possible avenue. And he did look into it, and it turns out that, like Binder said, it was false promise.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, it's really him being out there telling people about ivermectin not working is super important because he was affiliated with that group who in the beginning was just like a bunch of frontline COVID-19 doctors trying out whatever was possible and within reason before there was a vaccine. And then they went a complete fringe route and he cut ties with them. So, his voice behind this is really important because he has that sort of in there to let us know, how far off these doctors who are pushing this stuff went.
All right, we are going to head into the fun half. The phone number is 646-257-3920. See you there.
3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What? What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second. Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomi Key.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's
Stop talking for a second. Now let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? This me?
Yes?
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello, is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go smell it.
Libertarians.
They're so stupid, though.
Common sense says, of course.
Gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge met.
I'm positively quivering.
I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-35 501 1 half 3 8s
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
5 4 $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
You can call it satire. Sam goes, it's satire.
On top of it all, my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the week being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye.
We are back. We are back. Welcome to the fun half. I hope you enjoyed that break music, which I haven't heard yet because we don't hear it through our end, but here it's pretty good.
Yeah, do we have the credit for that, or maybe we can look that up?
Yeah.
Wait, there's new break music?
Apparently.
Yeah, it's a new surf rock break music song.
I was shoveling a sandwich in my mouth and we needed a few extra seconds, so that's kind of how it goes.
Wow, upgrading from the cashews to a full-blown sandwich.
Yeah, I was not to be, I was hoping to get a big workout in, and so like after the show, and I can't do it on an empty stomach. It's just not in my nature. So
What do you mean a big workout? You going to the what's that sound? Oh, is that the okay? Oh, that's the surfer. Oh, okay, got it. It makes sense now.
Awesome.
I love it. It reminds me of the Horrors, which is one of my favorite indie rock bands. That's from Cinco Sanders, I believe.
Very cool. Aaron is not cool. Good for you, MR. I signed a petition for Rana to be on the ballot, and I'm happy to see you guys interviewing her. As a New York 12 resident, we need someone else than Maloney. Yes. MK Ultra victim. Have you seen any of the conflicting reports from Bucha regarding the who perpetrated the mass killings there? Apologies if you've already touched on this. No.
No, and I also like I don't fog of war things. I'm not super interested in like making definite statements about this sort of thing, but I will just say generally on this sort of occasion of if Ukraine, which I doubt, but again, I haven't looked deeply into this, would stage something like this. Well, who set the environment for the dastardly Ukrainians to stage something like this? It was Russia in their invasion.
Yeah.
So, and ultimately, that's like the fundamental point. And on both sides, I'm skeptical of people who want to focus so much about certainty. And like I said, I'm just inclined to believe Russia is responsible. But even in like, let's say a future event happens, like, and there are things that the Ukrainian soldiers are doing to withdraw, and Russian soldiers that are also like, say like technically war crimes. But like fundamentally, who set the atmosphere and environment for this? It's Russia with their invasion, and it's, I don't know.
Yeah. A Square. Wow, Emma, fantastic interview. Must get the book. Clinton was like Obama for my cohort, and then we fell for Obama too. But in the end, like Adolf Reed said in MR recent interview, neoliberalism can only offer a modicum of democracy and equity. Your generation found that out much sooner. Yeah, I think it was more fertile ground for us to find it out sooner, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a democracy on Earth that doesn't exist sort of at the whim and with the threat of capital withdrawn from the agreement if the votes start going against the desires of the property class. I mean, so that's an important thing to understand with regards to democracy.
Binder Dad. Emma, please read the IMs in your Elizabeth Holmes voice.
It's a very specific request, Dad.
I did it the other day. Yeah, there. Emma, please read the IMs in your Elizabeth Holmes voice.
I love the fake voice that she does. Elizabeth Holmes, not Emma's imitation of Elizabeth Holmes. It's very much. It does sound like Romy from Romy and Michelle. It's a very specific kind of voice.
Very specific. God, I have not seen the finale yet because it came out in midnight last night. But loving the Dropout. It's fun.
I'm excited. I've been watching all the scam documentaries. I've been watching We Crashed, which I think is not as good as The Dropout because it has Jared Leto in it, but so it can't be. But for some reason, he really did not try to like mimic the guy at all. He's just going for a full Tommy Wiseau, like
he's the worst actor that is a lead actor in any in our generation by a mile. I mean, he's a terrible actor.
As like a huge scumbag, I think it's weird that they're having him portray somebody who's kind of a big scumbag, but not quite as big of a scumbag as Jared Leto might be.
You're right. Exactly. All right, let's take a call. Calling from an 818 number. I think I know who this is. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Dave from Jamaica.
Dave,
calling from work.
Dave from Jamaica.
Haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah. Been tied down a lot. Mining job is kind of pretty busy stuff in the day.
I mean, I'm not mad about it. It's just good to hear from you.
Yeah,
he calls into my show at night, so he's call. I'm hearing from Dave from Jamaica.
What's on your mind, Dave?
Well, I guess what's on my mind is I won't be going into the Ukraine stuff because I agree with Matt. The fog of war is there's too much that is too hard to confirm, and we're going to see the disaster of this thing way after. But I guess what I was trying to focus on is more of a light topic, since it is Thursday and we're supposed to be having more fun. Emma, you're kind of convincing me to get into sports betting. If I was to get into sports betting, what are the things, especially since I'm not the sport that I'm more familiar with, UFC, but let's say if I was willing to get into basketball, what are the things that you do before you make a bet?
Also, Emma, what cryptocurrency should I invest in? What stocks should I buy?
Dave, why do you want to know this?
Dave, I can't recommend this because I don't want you to lose money. But at the same, okay. So my point,
Emma, just do what all the influencers do and just say not financial advice after you give him all the financial advice.
Not
That'll cover
financial
you.
advice, but I usually will. A resource I use is NBC Edge. They have like it's like the website's kind of wonky in terms of, but it's a subscription service, but I use it for fantasy purposes too, for like football and things like that. They have some good tools on, betting overs and unders and the reliability and more probabilities and stuff of how things are gonna pan out. But basketball, I've had some bad luck betting on, honestly. So basketball is hard to bet on because the spreads, it's like, at the end of a game, it could be a tight game, and then the team that's losing is fouling, and so like there's a lot of empty points, and so the spread could be knocked off or thrown out of whack in that area. But I just actually need to get better at basketball betting because
I'm curious though, Dave. Like, why do you want to get into it? Like, just out of boredom, out of like financial need? Like, what's motivating this question?
He's been listening to my show.
Well, more for me. Well, to be honest, I hear what you're saying, Matt, and you're making a very good point. It's more of the financial need.
Oh, then I can't recommend. Like
not a good avenue.
Yeah.
I don't think.
It's not.
No. Yeah.
It's not
Go ahead.
reliable. It's if you're not just doing it with like a little, disposable $20, which is like what I like to do, gets me invested in a game. But don't try to make money off of it. It's not going to go well.
Wait, Emma. I heard you've been making so much. Emma, I heard you've been making so much money off of this stuff that you recently came into the office and told Sam that he doesn't need to pay you a salary anymore. This is pro bono work.
This is fake news. It's fake news. But Dave, I mean, it's like, if you don't, I don't know if those apps are even legal right now, like internationally. I think they're just only.
No.
Yeah.
But I think I was talking with this Linda before. Like, remember when you got the calls of people who said, well, I went into Bitcoin, it worked out for me. That type of stuff, right?
Yeah. This is not the same.
It comes from desperation, though. I think that's what I was going to say, right?
Yes, you're right. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of that. Like when we do segments on Bitcoin, people are like, well, I am using this to like basically be comfortable for the first time in life. And I'm like, good. I'm glad that it's working out for you in that limited situation. But that doesn't mean that I could recommend that to everybody else as like an avenue to the same sort of material stability, because it's extremely risky. And frankly, like it's a product of luck.
Yeah. So I wouldn't recommend it.
It's pure luck.
Well, I have a question based on.
Well, I guess I was asking it for more of a. Sorry, go ahead, Brandon. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say,
a little delay.
I think it's just me having a little bit of delay. But I was going to say, if you guys had $1,000 and you had to either bet it on a single sports game or put it on a cartoon photo of a monkey, which one would you do?
Sports game. It's like not even close.
Yeah, I do the sports
game.
Sports game.
Okay. Okay. Well, but we're going to answer
because
this
I
up.
think
it's a sport that you don't watch. So like for us, it's that cricket.
I mean,
because
you could bet the 1,000 on a likely outcome and still make like 500.
I think part of the reason I call too is I guess it's a kind of a funny way to because if you think about it, I'm not recommending sports betting to get you.
I don't recommend it. I mean, I was like kind of messing around earlier, especially if you're trying to make money. Like, I can't give advice on this, and I don't think it's a great idea. So, gonna let you go, Dave. But just
all right, later, guys. But,
later.
I'll talk to you tonight, Dave.
Yeah, later,
call into the show.
Later. Yeah. But I appreciate the interest, Dave. All right, let's get into some of these clips. You want to do the oil thing to start? I was kind of into this Candace.
Emma, you gotta
do
sort of
Candace
recalibrate.
What?
Emma, you gotta sort of recalibrate. If even Dave from Jamaica is listening to this show and he's getting out of this must sports bet like Emma,
I try. Sam is the one who's always talking about it. It's like blowing up my spot. He's the real culprit here. All right, so let's.
Are you guys even getting the sponsorship money from DraftKings or anything? What's the deal? You gotta
No,
at least.
we declined that years ago.
You just talk about it anyway for free.
Someone needs to like flash up the begambleaware.org link at the bottom of the screen so
That's
the
the
viewers
worst thing
know.
about those ads is there's like half the ad is the gambling hotline number in your individual state.
Let's move on. Let's move on.
Okay.
I really would love to move on. All right. Let's turn to this Candace Owens clip. So this, don't say gay bill has become the other one. Yeah, sorry. So Candace Owens, kind of like Dave Rubin, she has to overcompensate a little bit because she knows deep down that her audience is filled with racists, much like Rubin's audience is filled with homophobes. So they kind of go to places and say things that other hosts might not say. They're a bit more direct in their approach because they have to, give their audience the good stuff, get straight to the real hard, the real good stuff. So I couldn't even think of another thing. Here she is talking about the Don't Say Gay bill and just explicitly saying that it's gonna opposition to it is close to pedophilia, basically.
What we just examined is a mentally unstable adult predator who has access to children, our children. And there is only one kind of people who don't see it that way, and those are other predators. Like Disney, a company which focuses its content exclusively on children. They publicly announced that they are going to fight Florida legislators on behalf of these child groomers in the classroom. They will demand that these people, like the woman that we just showed you, has a right to speak to your child about her partner's trans feminist, whatever that even means. As if that wasn't bad enough, a private meeting amongst Disney's top executives recently leaked in which the animation director stated very clearly that Disney has been, quote, so welcoming to my not at all secret gay agenda, end quote. Yeah. It turns out it wasn't Ursula or Maleficent, Captain Hook, or even Scar in The Lion King. Nope. The greatest Disney villain of all time is Disney itself. Boycott them. Every park, every show, every coloring book. Because parents allow me to make this part perfectly clear.
Do I have to do
to
the
you.
coloring books? I really
What
want
will follow this, the intentional and overt confusion and sexualization of our children in the classroom, is obvious. Pedophilia is around the corner. And don't you allow them for 1 second to convince you that that's some imaginary fallacy that exists in your head. The slope is real. We must not give these freaks and predators so much as 1
Freaks and predators.
Welcome to Candace.
Okay, welcome to Candace. That's the opening. That's the cold open. That's the cold open. Welcome to the Candace Owens experience. I'm fucking crazy. So that that is what that, right? Like that is her basically saying gay people are predators. Gay people are a step away from predators. And not only are gay people and trans people predators, so anybody who voices opposition to this bill is leading to a slippery slope towards pedophilia, and thus they are predators in and of themselves.
I like when she says that Disney solely makes content for children, because that seems like self-apparent, but then you realize that a lot of Disney's consumers are like adult fans of Disney, and you really don't want to, get them on your bad side. Candace is going to have a lot of hate mail.
I can tell you, I've come across some Disney related posts on Facebook, home of conservatives. And they're trying to like fill up those Disney post comment sections with groomer, pedophile, and the Disney people are not having it. The conservatives are being run off of their own turf. The Disney people are going at them in the comment section on Facebook. But also, it's great that she runs down all the Disney villains as if they're real people, and like ends up on the finale that Disney is the true evil. And I mean, yeah, Disney's like a real company that exists, run by real people, and they hire people and fire people and do a lot of things. I mean, copyright laws in this country are the way they are single-handedly because of Disney.
Yeah,
They've done some pretty shitty things. But the reason you guys are going after them, not one of them.
Let's just be clear about that. The reason that these people are upset with Disney is because Disney is not adequately controlling a employee workforce that wants them to be more vocal about social justice issues in Florida. That is what they're upset about Disney with. That Pixar employees were pissed that the previous CEO would stand up to the "don't say gay" stuff, but the new CEO wants to keep his head below water. This is about disciplining workers.
Absolutely. These kinds of like pseudo anti-corporate screeds that they go on when we know for a fact that Republicans would defend corporations' right to poison your children's water, and often do defend the right to poison your children's water, is just, it's funny, but they're going after the old classics that they know have a lot of purchase in that suburban, middle class demographic in America that we constantly have to hear about, which is the sort of child predator sex panics that everyone who they don't like, except for, what they don't like is a child predator, because it's, the last vestige of a deeply, deeply unpopular political opinion that, we know that like the arc of time in some ways is against them. So they're just falling back on like their last few, tactics that they think can delay what they think of as the inevitable normalization of LGBTQ issues, at least broadly speaking in media. And so they just have to fall back on like, but these people are child predators, even as like Matt Gaetz goes around just like unbothered by their own party's like internal mechanisms.
Yeah, I mean, it's satanic panic. It's just they're doing a reboot of it, and they have always. I mean, Pat Buchanan was openly talking about the gay agenda and then conflating gay people with predators and pedophilia. They have always tried to other and push gay and trans people back into the closet by suggesting that they are after your kids and that their sexual deviance and the fact that they're interested in someone of the same sex also means that they're going to try to groom your children to be the same way. And how are they going to do that? By preying on them. And you have no idea what's going on at those schools, do you? So it's a way, one, to undercut teachers' unions, two, as Matt and you guys were saying, to undercut workers who might be voicing opposition at Disney, and three, they have seen an opening with the bigotry that's come out of this, hot button issue of trans women in sports. They find that they can effectively launder their hatred for trans people through that one topic, and because that's created this space of hostility towards non-cis, non-straight people, it's a way for them to renew their anti-gay agenda. So they see it as more fertile ground now, especially with the Supreme Court being constructed as it is.
Also, Candace Owens and her boss, or you can go first, Brandon.
I was going to say, doesn't she work for Ben Shapiro, and aren't they also launching their own little brand of, the Republicans in general have for the last few, I know Dan Crenshaw has his own little line of children's books, but I think Ben Shapiro is also putting money into his production company to produce more children's programming. So now they're just trying, this is just classic competitor grievance between the Ben Shapiro production company and, Disney, but I don't think Disney is going to lose that one.
Yeah, indoctrinated against the indoctrination. The thing about Candace Owens and her boss Ben Shapiro is that both of those people have inspired mass killers. And Candace Owens, most recently 2019, the Christchurch killings, 49 people died. Bodies were still being counted, and the manifesto said, quote, "The person who has influenced me above all was Candace Owens." And Candace Owens' only response to that was LOL.
Welcome to Candace.
Yeah, welcome to Candace.
Yeah.
So like her and Shapiro too, like who is not adequately like after spending the last 5 years or so plus stoking basically like terroristic hatred against Muslims. Now they're doing it against gay people.
Yep. All right, let's do those oil clips that you were mentioning. Which number is that? Seven and 8. Okay, I got to it. Here is Representative Paul Ruiz. Oh, I'm sorry, Raul Ruiz. In the middle of these, what committee? But House Energy and Commerce Committee hearings that they were conducting yesterday with oil executives about the high gas prices. And here he is addressing some of the top executives in the country, asking them about those high gas prices.
Madam Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Now I'm pleased to recognize Mr. Ruiz for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, for holding this hearing on a critical issue on the top of my mind and my constituents' mind. In my district last week, I saw prices between $5.49 and $6.40 a gallon. These prices are outrageous, and my constituents are struggling at the pump and struggling to make ends meet. I hear from constituents who tell me how the outrageous gas prices are putting everything out of reach. They tell me that they're struggling to afford the gas just to go to work. I'm curious, on your salaries, do any of you have trouble affording the gas to get to your job? I didn't think so. And as this graph behind me based on research shows, while American families are struggling with high gas prices, you and your big oil corporations are making record profits choosing to keep supply low instead of investing oil in production. In the 9,000 unused permits, you choose to make more profits for shareholders. During this Russian war, you are ripping the American people off, and it must end. Gas prices need to go down. And while the rest of America is trying to make
So he hits on a lot of good points there. Basically, I don't know if he later says this, but he stopped short of talking about how these oil corporations are price gouging, because that's exactly what they're doing. They're taking the scarcity or the like largely artificial scarcity from the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, inflating the importance of that, and then increasing the price of oil to then give kickbacks to their shareholders, stock buybacks for their executives. All while they take tens of millions of dollars in subsidies from our government in order to keep gas prices at a level that's affordable for people in this country, because unfortunately we have yet to break our dependence on fossil fuels. So they're not only taking taxpayer money, they're also using this conflict in Russia, or I'm sorry, in Ukraine, the invasion of Ukraine, in order to make themselves richer. This is disaster capitalism at its finest. Hello?
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
right.
you
I guess
hit-
I nailed
hit
it
the nail on the
so
head. Yeah, I mean,
hard that
you
nobody.
hit the nail on the head. I mean, I don't know what else to add there. I mean,
All right, well
it's-
then let's go to this
What
other clip
what I will
then.
say, though, is
Oh,
that,
okay.
I mean, like, you know, in some ways, though, I'm glad that he's saying it, but also we constantly hear politicians, Democrats especially, and that's good because they should be doing this, you know, talk about these issues like and they telling the oil and gas companies to lower gas prices, but it's like, you know, what do you expect? Like, this is literally the world that you've helped create. Like, well, this is the system we live in, and this is, you know, you're against anything that would actually you know, reconfigure or recalibrate the way everything currently works. Like, you know how we make sure that we don't price gouge? We nationalize the oil and gas companies. We make sure that there aren't corporations and CEOs and shareholders who are being put front and center, but the American people are. I mean, you know, how many times are we going to hear this same thing without any real solution offered? I mean, good for him on pointing this stuff out, but in the end, what his end game to help his constituents is please, oil and gas companies, listen to me and lower your gas prices. Not going to work. It's not going to work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no,
Yeah. You go ahead, Brandon.
I was going to say, yeah, I think a lot of Democratic Party strategy seems, especially with stuff like this, or when Elizabeth Warren goes after various sort of monopolied interests, you just see like this kind of strategy of, well, we're going to leave the incentive structure on the table that makes this make financial sense for yourself, for your investor, and then we're going to try like the blame and shame game. And I think for a lot of people who have like an ego and like a dignity and like certain types of pride, they think of how embarrassing it would be to be yelled at on television in front of like the entire country. But for like a billionaire who's going to make more $1 billion next year, it doesn't mean as much to them. And so like the question of like how practical is it to continue to have these sort of revolving doors of like, CEOs, whether it's Jamie Dimon or Mark Zuckerberg or various oil industry execs coming in just to be like performatively shamed in front of the country if it doesn't actually lead to any real like material difference in the way we actually like, tackle the negative incentive structure that's causing this behavior to be that way.
Well, it's like what we talked about with Luke here is there's a section of Democrats that feel like politics is just making people feel good and performing actions of like catharsis and public shaming of Republicans or going against Fox News and stuff, which again, there is value to it, right? I mean, making it clear that this isn't the just inertia and the way that things have to be because of what Russia's doing in Ukraine is, I think, an important point. You could also make the point, if you wanted to, that part of the reason that Trump's sanctions against Venezuelan oil still exist, by the way, and the the point that is more overreaching, and the one that I wish Democrats would pivot to immediately after every time gas prices come up, is that this is why this is unsustainable. This is why we need a Green New Deal. Sell your agenda that's also going to help the planet with every breath you take when it comes to talking about oil and gas prices. That's what you have to do, and that's your responsibility as a Democrat, like not to just shame executives. Put alternative legislation on the table so these disaster capitalists don't have the opportunity to do this anymore.
Yeah, if you don't want us to take Venezuelan oil, give us a Green New Deal. And the other a good question to ask, and I agree, like I think the fundamental problem with the performative nature of this is exactly why Pelosi puts the squad on the House Oversight Committee and no other ones.
That's a pet peeve of mine.
And it's horrible.
Yeah.
But I will just say, like on this sort of front, that's a good question, and it's a good question to ask rich people in general, and particularly capitalists. Is not only like, are you having trouble affording your ability to get to work, but what are you having trouble affording? What have you had trouble affording at any point in the last decade that Americans have gone through, like the housing crisis and all this stuff? What have you had trouble affording? And the answer for any sort of super rich person is either nothing or really embarrassing, something about like houses or vacations.
Yeah.
And like that's the problem with the world today, is that we have all these problems, and insulated from any sort of sacrifice to meet those problems is wealthy people who make passive income.
Yeah.
There's a shortage of mega yachts, actually. Don't forget that.
My heart breaks. J Money, I'm honestly baffled that so many conservatives are going so hard on something so libelous and defamatory as calling Disney pedophilic. Don't they know that Disney has some of the most well-paid, well-staffed lawyers in the country? If they get sued, similar to the Dominion voting machine critics, it will be a great silver lining. Yeah.
I don't like libel laws, and I don't want to encourage Disney's lawyers.
I think, that's the one thing that occasionally, I don't want to support Disney in any way, but that is the one thing that occasionally I think right-wing content creators like brush up against like reality and the fact that other companies, this country does have laws about that. And it's amazing. I'm thinking about Alex Jones and losing that suit that he recently lost. And the biggest champions of like cancel culture is wrong will defend them up until like that lawsuit actually drops, and it seems like it's gonna, the conviction happens and suddenly they're just persona non grata. It's like, occasionally like spreading these kinds of rumors have rather actual consequences in the real world, and there's been a effort online to insulate people who spread these kinds of rumors online, or who spread just like out and out say lies online to raise their sort of their earning potential in certain spaces, that to insulate them from the consequences of doing that offline, whether it be like the lawsuits from Dominion or Disney, or from just the victims of their propaganda. And that's all just been encompassed under like the conversation of like cancel culture. Should someone be canceled just for their ideas, even if those ideas are that Disney is making like pedophile coloring books?
Well, one of the things they're trying to do, though, and possibly partially, is to try to avoid any scenario where they could actually get into legal trouble. And funny enough, they're doing it, and this will also harm children who this actually happens to. They're trying to redefine the term groomer and grooming to begin with. There's like this image going around that I've seen a lot of conservatives share with the definition of grooming. And this is not the definition of grooming, but this is what they're claiming it is: the deliberate act of bringing a child into a sexual, political, or racial ideology, practice, cult, or lifestyle without the knowledge or consent of his or her parents, for the aim of isolating them from their family so the external party can abuse and manipulate them. That is not what grooming is. Let's be crystal clear what grooming is. Grooming is when someone builds relationship, trust, and emotional connection with a child or young person so they can manipulate, exploit, and abuse them. It has to do with being exploited sexually, sexual abuse, child trafficking. That's what grooming is. It's not when a child learns something about politics in school that you didn't want them to learn about. That's not grooming.
Well, they're also trying to muddy the waters around grooming, because we know, and this occasionally pops up around the country, that Republican legislators are big defenders of those sort of child marriage laws that pop up.
I'm sorry, they're literally making,
defending one right now.
There's an effort right now to lower the age of consent for marriage.
No, not just lower it. They want to be rid of it. No age of consent. If the marriage is between a man and a woman, says the specific bill that Tennessee is trying to.
I think
because that's not grooming. That's not grooming, right?
Well, I mean,
even though the kid is underage, that's not grooming.
Well, I mean, it speaks to like that it speaks to their desire to muddy the waters around grooming, but also, they feel like in the case, I think, of Tennessee, like they're providing religious exemptions for it. But, stuff like that, like Christianity or traditionally valued American ideologies in their minds, like racism or homophobia or sexism, that kind of indoctrination does not count as grooming up until a point. I mean, up and including the point in which like it prescribes like child marriage or uneven relationships between like people at different like levels of power in other relationships. So like we know that they're also just trying to like make sexual predation more acceptable amongst other things.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's ultimately the only way to really arm a child against sexual abuse really is to let them know what is acceptable sexual touching, when it's acceptable to have sexual touching, and what is unacceptable. And this whole entire freak out is actually making kids more susceptible to being victimized.
Omega's Henron Dragon. Sorry, Daily Wire. I can't hear that over Candace's possible love of Tiana as the first black princess of Disney. Gay characters kissing in Eternals. Or the Marvel films and Star Wars. Valkyrie mourning her girlfriend, or Deadpool being pansexual. Wait till they find out Birdo from Super Mario is essentially a trans character. Not aware of that.
Yeah. Or that Tweety Bird's a boy. They're not gonna hate that.
Dr. Nick, Matt Leck, have you ever heard of King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard?
King Gizzard and what is it?
Lizard Wizard.
Yeah, I
Bradley
have.
has.
I didn't know that was the name, King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. Okay, yeah. I remember the King Gizzard part.
Rob from Dedham, if Dave wants a good podcast to listen to for a reason to not bet on basketball, Whistleblower about Tim Donaghy is great. If betting basketball, I just bet team and player futures and never bet the spread. The spread is very difficult with basketball. The other Biden, Emma, please don't pretend you can give advice on sports betting. I don't think I was. I know the few people who can make a living on it, and trust me, most people have zero clue. Yep. I don't even think I have.
It's the same with all this stuff. Professional gamblers, day traders, the number of people who lose everything compared to the number of people who actually make a living, even not even get rich, just make a living off of it. It's like it's off. The scale is completely off. Vast majority of people lose everything or at least something when they think they can like win big when it comes to anything involving betting or even like in investments. It doesn't usually work out for people when they're doing it like that.
Dave
think
from
it's ver-
Jamaica says grooming is a Republican politician dating app. Good. That's a good one. Yeah, instead of Bumble, it's groomer. That's
Without
what
the
they should
E?
call it. Yeah, groom. Right, like Getter or whatever that thing is. All right, let's take another call. Calling from a 610 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 610.
Can you hear me?
I can. Who's this?
Hi, Emma. This is Steve.
Hey,
from,
Steve.
Audubon.
Steve from Audubon. What's on your mind?
A few things, like existential stuff. This whole thing with the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida has me really concerned. I didn't expect to see this kind of revamp of like 1980s like anti-gay stuff like here. I guess I'll hear your like answers off the call, but like I wanted to know, like, I think if I know right, Matt and I are both not Gen X, but like you and Brandon are Gen Z. So I wanted to know, like, do you think that this kind of like
I'm not Gen
anti-gay
Z.
stuff is going to
I'm a millennial. Yeah.
I think everyone
Yeah,
here is millennial. Yeah.
Oh, everyone's
I'm not Gen X. I'm a millennial. I'm an older millennial, but I'm millennial.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Okay.
But, like, I just wanted
It's
to
okay. I have a young
this
looking
had-
face.
Steve?
Did he hang up when I said that? You know, that's a. I have that effect on people.
We lost him somehow. I wanted to hear the point he was going to make because I think
Yeah.
it was going somewhere good. Oh man, can
We
you
must
call
have
back
lost
or
him.
drop an IM?
All right, I'm
What happened?
sorry, Steve. Yes, send me an IM and or call back and I'll pick up for you.
I mean, broadly,
Yeah, we could kind of answer.
any sort of like, and I do think like gay acceptance in our lifetime approximates or is at least like edging towards something like a revolution in that limited sense. But there's always a counter revolution, and that's what we're experiencing right now.
I mean that's why we're seeing it, because I mean just look at like what is like one of the major, and maybe this is a little bit too online of me, but I don't think I'm off here. One of the major pushers of this whole using the word groomer against all your political enemies is one of these online accounts on the conservative right called the Libs of TikTok. Even
Oh,
Joe
when I-
Rogan,
Yeah.
even Joe Rogan has promoted that account.
Yeah.
And Glenn loves it too.
Glenn, you said?
Glenn Greenwald, yes.
Yeah, he promoted it too. Basically, they've been calling everyone who, you know, they, and the reason I'm bringing this account up is because basically the whole point of this account is to scroll through TikTok and grab videos that they think are too woke to make fun of to their conservative followers. And who are these people who are too woke? Well, it's TikTok. So they tend to be young. Even the teachers that they pull to like attack teachers on there, the teachers are even young, probably in their like, mid-20s at the oldest, some of these teachers that they pull on here. So we got young people who are, some of them, many of them, part of the LGBT community or allies to the LGBT community. Some of them are even children, like the Libs of TikTok. I've seen many times pull people. I'm like, are these people that they're mocking even 18? So they see this stuff. They see how accepted, being gay or transgender is to these younger generations. And who is their audience? Who are they feeding this stuff to? The parents or grandparents of those generations. So they're seeing this shit and they're going, oh my God, what the hell? We have to put a stop to this. So it is feeding into each other. Like that's how they use this stuff. Parents who never cared about their kids in the first place, who know nothing about their kids' lives because they don't care to find out, are discovering from Libs of TikTok and other right-wingers that, holy shit, my kid is accepting of trans people because God forbid they might know a trans person who goes to their school. Unheard of. How did they learn this stuff? Like that's what we're seeing. That's the dynamic here. Like that's why this has risen back, because they're seeing what their children are accepting and they don't like it.
Yeah, that's the same reason that the Daily Wire and stuff for PragerU, they're making these books and movies for kids to help reverse the indoctrination. And in reality, it's just a marketing ploy for the anxiety of those kinds of parents. So they'll buy it. I don't even think they actually think it's going to work, but maybe the ideologues do.
I mean, this sort of stuff has been, it's just been ongoing. It flares up, I think, like Matt was saying, because, sometimes we just see big moments of even just like representational social inclusion, but from various groups, either by legislation or, like executive action that says that no, we're not going to tolerate anti-Asian hate crime, like leads people to start freaking out because it doesn't like specifically, say that we're not going to like not care about like white people getting attacked by violence too. And I think there's just an instinctual, especially amongst a certain class of like middle class suburban Americans, whether they really exist as a voting bloc or just in the minds of like the people trying to gin up these like sex panic or moral panic controversies about like what's going to happen to the children. Even the trans people in sports, like rather trans women participating in women's sports or trans men participating in men's sports has no real bearing on reality other than this like anxiety that like, the normal kids, and in this case, like straight white kids who have all the other benefits are going to be out competed by people who have unfair advantages.
Yeah.
And, when you pare it down to trans people in sports, it seems like almost sort of reasonable. But then when you realize that these are the same people who are complaining about like their white kid not getting into like the school of their choice because a black kid got there and they think that's not fair, or there are too many Asians at Harvard or whatever kind of thing they're about, this week, it's all really just about like this idea that there are more people being included into the conversation that they would prefer to be excluded because it provides them with a, unfair benefit. Whether you're talking about affirmative action, whether you're talking about, just barring LGBTQ people from pursuing certain jobs, et cetera, they just want it to be, tilted towards them. And if any effort to untilt it towards them is seen as trying to like unfairly oppress them.
Yep. Let's always on point. Let's do this Sean Penn clip though. That's what I have on the brain.
Is that what you've been thinking about?
Did he ever smelt his Oscar?
Well, that's what I wanted to get to. So for people that don't know, Sean Penn said that he would like melt down his 2 Oscars. I think he's gotten multiple, right? In protest if the Academy did not ask Zelensky to speak. Thinks he, I don't know. He might have some other things going on. I just a thought experiment there, but I don't really know what this Sean Penn turn has been. Here he is on Sean Hannity's program. He's either Carmen Sandiego going over all over the world and solving mysteries, like interviewing El Chapo, or maybe he's some sort of CIA asset. It's unclear at this point. Here he is on Sean Hannity's program talking about the Russia-Ukraine war, the invasion of Ukraine, and Hannity is speaking to him for some reason, gives his thoughts on what should be done with Vladimir Putin, because people need to be held accountable if you invade a sovereign country without pretext.
There or in Chicago, for that matter. Anywhere. I don't want to see it, and we can fix all these problems if we have the will and desire to, I believe. We're the greatest country on earth. And I think the Ukrainians will win. Western Europe and America needs to supply them with the weaponry to win. And if they do, they'll be defeating, in my view, evil in our time. And that's following the Reagan doctrine and, frankly, the Trump doctrine, even though you don't care about doctrines. You know what the Hannity doctrine is? I'll give it to you quick. If you invade a sovereign country, you forfeit your right to lead a country, and you forfeit your right to live, meaning Vladimir Putin has forfeited his right to live. Last word. I think that what would be most interesting about that conversation is to ask those generals.
Okay, well, whatever. I don't really give a shit what Sean Penn thinks, but although I am fascinated by whatever turn this is, and do actually wonder what connections he has to the government. Regardless, so Sean Hannity calling for the assassination of George W. Bush.
Right. That's what I took out of it as well. Yeah.
I mean, this is like what was so Trump did this too, talking about the assassination of the Iranian general Soleimani. He's a war criminal. That's what they said. Oh, but he's also a government official. So Trump dropped the mother of all bombs, killed a bunch of people within the first month or two of him being in office, killed a young girl in a raid at his direction. That's what the United States did. That's a war crime. I mean, and Bush committed war crimes many times over. Condoleezza Rice, Dick Cheney. I mean, go down the list of the people that could be charged with war crimes here in the United States. And Hannity's going even further, saying that they have the right to be assassinated as well. And like, also the implications of what they're saying here too is, I mean, he's a jagoff TV host. I don't really take it that seriously when it's just coming from him. But the fact that it was echoed by people like Lindsey Graham, that is there are hawks that think that that would be like a productive way to take out Putin. And then there are people on the other side of the war hawk coin who are a little more subtle about it, like Hillary Clinton, basically insinuating that this could be a way to slowly bleed out Putin, using this war in Ukraine as a proxy to weaken him on the national stage. That means Ukrainian bodies and lives in order to do so. It's just like they treat this as like going after and getting the big bad. And it's really sick.
Well, I mean, you can't say that stoking proxy wars between people in Russia by America in the past has ever led to anything bad happening. So, you know, I think that just precedent-wise, there's no reason to be so dismissive of it. I can't think of one incident where American armed proxy fighters and instead to resist Russia led to anything bad happening, you know, on a global scale, but just in America at all. Not once.
Yeah, I think it like Lindsey Graham particularly, like I think if you are going to go down that lane of asking for assassination of leaders of other state governments, that you open yourself up to those same things. I think that's the level of responsibility that needs to be applied here to people like Lindsey Graham or even like Sean Penn. Like this idea that we're floating the idea that we should, even like the war crimes like stuff, that we're actually going to like end this by bringing Putin into the Hague. Like, no, all that does is push settlement to this conflict farther into the distance. So like the idea that decapitation strike against Russia is even like on the
yeah.
Like, anybody who brings that up, they should have the same thing come back to them.
All right, which one you want to do?
I will say that back to the Sean Penn, because that's who I'm right there with you. I'm fascinated by what's going on here. I met him once. He came to when I was in film school. He came to the school to do a talk.
Wow.
And dude's got a huge ego.
Oh man.
We met like we had James Gandolfini come. We had Christina Ricci come. A bunch of celebrities who at that time were like really big. And everyone super down to earth, nice, you know, very wanting to be there to help the students, learn something. Sean Penn, just huge ego, the guy. First thing he does, by the way, and this is like right when like the New York City no smoking inside, like indoors laws just like had passed. And like, it was a really big deal. Like at that time, like you can't do it.
Yeah.
First thing he does is sits down and starts smoking on a cigarette in the school. It's like, what are you doing, buddy? What are you doing? He was like just a huge ego, like his whole talk. Yeah, not Spicoli. I'll tell you that much.
How was Christina Ricci? Because I'm a huge fan.
She was really cool. I got a picture with her. She took a picture with me. I got a picture with her. Yeah.
Love her in Sleepy Hollow. Love her in Cursed with Jesse Eisenberg. And also the guy who plays Jesse in Gilmore Girls, whose name I can't remember right now.
Jess.
I also got a picture of James Gandolfini. So yeah, the only guy who wasn't taking photos was Sean Penn.
Oh,
that's not shocking.
He's not going to smelt his Academy Award either.
And he should.
He got it for playing Harvey Milk, I think. That's what he won it for.
Yeah, you're right.
I was an extra in the movie Mona Lisa Smile as a child. Which has Julia Roberts, Julia Stiles, Kirsten Dunst, some big names. The Julia Roberts would not take a photo with 7-year-old little girl me, even though the part of the scene that she was in my house. Like she was sitting in my living room because they filmed it in my house, and that's how we got cast as extras. Anyway, so because it was an old house. So anyway, yeah. And then I ended up being the flower girl in Kirsten Dunst sweating in that movie. So you can see me as like a little dot in the background.
Wait a minute. You're in this movie?
Yes.
I gotta. Can we really see you?
I have a photo somewhere on my phone. Maybe I'll send it to Bradley, and if while we're taking a call, I'll try to find it. And we can put it up on the screen. There's like there's one way you can see me in the background. There's a whole shot of my mother, who's very beautiful and looks wonderful in it. But anyway, that's a story for a different day.
What are you talking about? This is the fun half. This is literally the
I
time
guess.
where
Right,
we
but
talk about
I
this
gotta
stuff.
go on my phone and find this stuff.
I was
Have you
most
guys seen
recently
that movie?
featured. I was actually just about to rewatch Mona Lisa Smile. It's funny enough because it's always being recommended to me by streaming apps, and now I know why.
It's
Google
pretty
has become
corny.
terrifying.
It's pretty corny. All right, I'll see if I can find it. But let's take a call.
If Netflix recommended it to you under like the very specific category of like movies your MR co-host is in, then I would have been like, whoa, what's going on?
I don't think I got a credit. I don't think I got a credit. I have no lines.
I'll pause the movie at the credit scene and I'll just like write on my screen in a Sharpie.
Oh yeah, you don't get
Fargo.
credit if you don't have a line. So yeah,
No.
that's how it works. I was doing extra stuff back in the day, so I recall that. Yeah, there is a very good shot where Elliot Stabler and what's her face, Olivia Benson from SVU are standing next to each other, and they start walking down a hall, and there I am right in the middle of them in the background. You just see me.
I was most recently featured in a Vice documentary about a barbecue place, and by featured I mean I was in line at the place and they like did a panning shot. I think they got me in it, so look out for that.
All right, I found these photos.
Barbecue was good though.
I took a screenshot of the scene. All right, this is bad broadcasting, but
Hold up your camera. Hold up your phone to the camera.
No, it's on my computer. It's on my computer. Hold on.
You do this. Let's. Oh, you got it. All right, cool. Let's see.
No, we'll take a call. And then we'll. Put
Yeah,
it
do
up.
a call.
All
That's
right.
what I do on my show too. When I'm trying to get something for the next segment, and like I need to grab a video, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna take a call. Let them talk while I do everything I need to do.
Calling from a 405 number. Who's this? Where you calling from?
It's Gregory from Oklahoma.
Hello, Gregory. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are y'all doing?
Doing well.
Doing good.
Good.
What would you like to talk
I
about?
wanted to call and wanted to talk about my campaign for a little bit. Next week is filing, and right now I'm trying to fundraise so I can be able to pay for the filing fee. Also am going to be paying for shirts for people because I've been promising people shirts for months now, and I feel bad for not being able to get them. And also, I'm getting a billboard on I-40 near my district, and I'm going to have to pay for that as well. So, yeah, just fundraising for that and, knocking doors and stuff like that. If people want to donate, they can go to my campaign website, Gregory4HD26.com.
We put that up.
And there's a donation part right there, and you can either donate with the Act Blue link or you can write a check and mail it to me. Let's see, I think that's pretty much it. But
There you
everything's
are.
been
That
going
clean ass
all right.
website.
Yeah, it's great. And a fellow Majority Report listener helped make that website, and yeah, it's been great. Been pretty stressed out lately because of the campaign and everything I've been doing, but I'm managing things pretty okay, I think.
Awesome.
But any donations help, especially if it's a small monthly recurring donation of like $5. That also would be really, really great. But yeah, I guess I won't mention anything about Sam's video not doing as well as Farron's video since he's not here.
You've got to save that for Sam. You've got to save that for Sam.
Farron's got some sort of YouTube magic. I'm not sure what's going on there. Farron knows how to get
running out apparently.
All right. Appreciate it, Gregory.
yeah.
Have a good one. Everyone support his
You too,
campaign.
thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Who's Farron? Who?
Farron Cousins.
Oh, all right, yeah.
Fair and balanced. He really missed an opportunity.
No, he does that.
Yeah.
That's exactly what his show's
Oh,
called.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why
Yeah.
I know, because like unlike Tim Pool, who refuses to name his show The Deep End, Farron Cousins has a great name for his show.
God. All right, put up this picture.
Frankly, I don't like to come across as a jealous person, but I'm so jealous that you guys have been in the background of like minor movies in the early TV shows in the early 2000s.
Jealous of that?
This is my
yes.
claim to. This is my claim to fame.
I would love to have been the little black child in the background of some movie. I don't know if there's a little black child in like Tristan or in Isolde, but I would have done that. I don't
Wait,
care.
didn't your mom date? What were you telling me earlier?
That's just like stuff that happens when you live in Brooklyn, in the in the 90s. But
All right,
I'm
this
talking
is
about
me
like
in the
actually
background,
on
and then
air.
we're moving on from it. But this is me with Julia Stiles. See me? That's little me.
With the little hair thing.
That's
on
my
your head?
little girl. Yeah, that's me. So.
Oh wow, that's actually pretty like you're not the camera's not focused on you, but you're quite clearly there. I mean,
It's yeah, and then there's other parts like I'm in the processional, and my mom was upset because there were other scenes that I was in that got cut. I'm like,
Oh, is
Mom,
there-
I mean, I don't think you can really complain about that one.
Release the Emma cut of Mona Lisa Smiles. new drinking game. Whenever Emma shows up on screen, you got to take a shot.
My
It's
poor little
4 hours
sister was
long.
pretty
4
much
hour
cut out
long.
entirely. My little sister was pretty much cut out entirely, and she was
Oh.
like, when we were little kids, it was kind of something I'd rib her and tease her about, but sad. Anyway,
Very cool. Also, got to ask, why is it just on your phone?
it was on. I tweeted a screenshot. Like John Idarola said, like it asked. I forget. I like.
Why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't it be?
I don't know. It's a good idea.
It would be on my phone.
I should have clips of the things I've done. That's a good idea.
I have a gif of my friend who works on Mob Wives getting caught in a scene where one of the cast members stormed off, and he was coming up a staircase that they weren't expecting to be filming, and he just has to act like just a regular person.
It's
like, oops, you can storm past me.
In a world where people remember, like people who are over 30 remember their SAT scores from high school, you cannot be afraid to style on anybody. You gotta keep any clout you have, you gotta have it on hand.
I mean, this is like this is my actual claim to fame, as opposed to this stupid progressive political commentating that I do. Right? I don't even know what my job title is. What is
Some people have never met Julia Stiles or Julia Roberts. They know 2 less Julias than you do. So
That's true. That's true.
You know what they say. Every progressive commentator is the failed child actor.
Yep. That tracks with me. All right, let's do one more clip here. You guys have anything that you have in mind? Oh, I guess I'm kind of interested in this TikTok from the Russian influencers. So I guess Chanel, the designer, stopped doing business in Russia due to the invasion of Ukraine, which a lot of businesses have done so from a PR perspective, and it's just it's part of their branding. But Chanel is a fancy purse company, and here are some Russian, I guess, models / influencers cutting up their bags in response to this. And I get the only reason I find this fascinating is because this seems like something the American right would do, and it's mirrored here in Russia.
Expensive Chanel bags.
Chanel, давай, до свидания.
In protest of being banned from new purchases by the designer brand. Moscow models and influencers have accused the company of Russophobia after Chanel pulled out of the country.
Oh my God, that's hard to watch. That's a pretty
Chanel
bag.
has also asked Russians on shopping trips abroad to sign pledges saying they won't wear or display the brand in Russia. Russian TV presenter and actress Marina Ermoshkina said that,
if owning Chanel means selling my motherland, then I don't.
Oh my God!
She's
and
got
demanded other
what are
Russian
those
women
like
to do the same.
Huge scissors. I can't
those
even.
clippers that you used to like cut like,
Garden
garden
shears.
shears. Yeah.
That's effective. God, what a mistake.
they're hardcore though. Americans barely wanted to like destroy their Keurigs. These are expensive bags, assuming they're real. No offense to anybody. You gotta assume that they're real.
Person or entity.
All right. So anyway, that's interesting to me because, right, like we're currently seeing a right-wing push against Disney here in this country. There's been like destruction of woke products by right-wingers before, the burning of Kaepernick jerseys, other things like that. that was particularly sad because those bags are beautiful, but it's also idiotic because I'm sure like they would be vintage if you just held on to them and sold them later in life. But regardless, it also is like brings up a meta conversation about how, yeah, these are like, nationalists, and I don't agree with their politics, but so many ways registering your protest against a government action is so much in our like capitalist society, in a neoliberal society. Most people express that agency through consumerism and commodities because we have like not really been able to we've undercut forms of connection and stuff like that, and that manifests itself on the right as well.
It's interesting because a couple of weeks ago I spoke with a Russian socialist writer, Yegor Kotkin, who's a big fan of this show. You guys should reach out to him and have him on. He's really good. He basically told me just how far Russia has gone to basically integrate like American right-wing culture into their own. And he was explaining to me how like, he used the example of like in the Russian Orthodox Church, family value something that was ever a part of it historically. And then all of a sudden, as the US right wing started to integrate more into Russian, culture, the connections there, all of a sudden in Russia, they're talking about family values and the family. And it's like, he's like, this is not a thing that happened here without the influence from like the US. And further, you see it here with this whole cutting of the Chanel bags. I mean, this is something that the American right does to
Putin said
voice their
cancel
displeasure.
culture. Putin said cancel culture the other day about J.K. Rowling. I mean, a lot of this like cultural grievance. It repeats itself. It replicates. It's copied basically is what I'm trying to say, and it's on purpose.
Right. And it's funny because, here, American liberals, you constantly hear them say how, like, Putin's pulling the strings behind every bad thing that happens here. You heard it with Trump. You heard it with anything. Anytime anything happened with the right, American liberals automatically like, oh, it's Putin's influence. And the funny thing is, it's the opposite. It's the opposite. Like the American right wing is doing all of this on their own. They're the groundbreakers. They're the forefathers of all this right wing, all this right wing rhetoric that goes around the globe, and you can just see it in Russia. Like you could see it elsewhere, like in Brazil.
I can't let you spread FUD about America, Matt. The only thing America exports overseas is freedom. We don't export bad ideas or war or instruments of war, just freedom.
Yeah.
Does this make anybody question like what the use of sanctions are? Like, it's basically it's fostering nationalism. Like, I feel like
I don't think that's a sanction though. That's just Chanel making making
like
a
ultimately,
statement.
like those appeals from those influencers are like, look at us. I'm a Russian. You're a Russian. We're all being attacked as Russians. And I think it's like the Chanel thing's funny because it's rich people and who cares. But ultimately, like I just think like the McDonald's pulling out, right? Is that having any positive effect to bring this
I hear you.
thing to an end? I just think like, I don't know. It's very, I just don't quite understand what the point of all this is.
Well, it's
I mean, get those numbers up.
Go on.
Get those TikTok numbers up. Get those TikTok subscribers up. I mean, it's I think honestly, it's like Emma said, like, some of this is just neoliberalism being, people's own personal, pursuit of their dream job, their own personal pursuit of like money and influence, just like overlapping on whatever the topic du jour happens to be of the day. And so like, if you can get clout from being anti-Russian, if you can get clout from being pro-Russian, if you can get clout from being anti-Ukraine, if you can get clout from being pro-Ukraine, then people have to sort of like map out what makes the most sense for their brand at any, one point in time. And so like, it's, in many ways, it's the same as a lot of our conversations about the Disney versus the right wing, like whether or not this is like an actually politically motivated move from like Russian influencers or just like a craven attempt to seek like clout amongst like the market that they're going to have now, because they're being, many ways less Western audiences to their content are going to be less receptive to it, is, just kind of up in the air because people are just moving in those circles now.
Also,
who knows?
Also, you have to consider, being that these are influencers and not just like, random Russian citizens on social media, there's a chance they could have been reached out to as well. And this could be a campaign where, hey, can let's do this and send a message to any American company that thinks they want to pull this off next.
And
Yeah, they
also, it just seems like promotion for Chanel, which like these companies are moral abominations, regardless of if they're selling to Russians or not. Like here's from 2018: wake up call as luxury fashion brands criticize over supply chain slavery risk.
Yeah.
Luxury fashion houses Dior, Chanel, and Dolce & Gabbana are among the least transparent of the major retailers when it comes to providing information about their supply chain. Like I just. Like this whole thing, it's like
Well, they can sell these bags like $4,000.
and now you get Europeans that are going to buy Chanel bags because it's like a pro-Europe patriotism type of thing.
Well, you can. That's how the only way that you can express yourself, and as an act of solidarity is through commercialism.
Right.
It's sick.
Absolutely. It's definitely sick, and it's one of those things where it's hard to disaggregate people's like actual care about Ukraine from like what is what is useful as a brand strategy for a company that is inherently evil to like frame something else that's going on that's bad in the world that's like redemption for them. I think that's a big part of like Americans' interest in the war, or rather the invasion of Ukraine as well, where it's just like Chanel or Pepsi or whoever is using slave labor this week to go like, you see, this week there's a new bigger villain, so maybe we should all be on the same side against that villain. Exactly. It's very like a TV universe. Like, sometimes you got to team up with the bad guy to fight the bigger bad guy. Sometimes
the Hulk is on our team now.
Sometimes there are space Nazis that you got to team up to fight. Sometimes the moon is hollow and just full of space Nazis.
What the hell are you talking about?
A lot of things, actually. Surprisingly.
All right, let's take one more call and read some IMs, and we will get out of here.
I will say, the only way to dispose of your Chanel bag properly is to mail them to me. Otherwise, it's a crime.
No, me. Calling from a 469 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Sorry.
This is Eddie from Fort Worth.
Hey, Eddie. What's on your mind?
Two things. It sounds weird to start off with this, but I'm not like a pro-murder guy or anything like that. But like, if somebody did something to my family, all it takes is, I guess, one bad night. You know what I'm saying? Like to be pro-murder, pro something that's like really crazy.
No, that's not being pro-murder. Like that's I'm gonna kill somebody. But your position isn't that you would think that society shouldn't stop prosecuting murders entirely, right? Like just because you would do something doesn't mean you want murder stricken off the books as a penalty or crime.
Yeah, what are you talking about, Eddie?
Correct. Well, that was just the lead-in to a comic book. That was a one bad joke by the Joker. Anyway, the reason I'm calling about comic books specifically is because I think they're a little bit more influential than you guys I think are aware of. I think in the 50s there was a comic book of Superman fighting and beating in comics and in the real world the KKK. Have you guys heard of that comic?
Well, I mean, my understanding is that like there were a lot of during that time that Stan Lee was fairly progressive and like tried to get ahead of some of the. I mean that's actually Marvel. So.
Right. This was in the 50s. But what happened was there was this one guy. He infiltrated the KKK and talked about how he witnessed firsthand how ridiculous it was being in a cult. And what they did was. Then they made a comic book of him fighting the KKK, but it was only like symbols visible to the KKK because they were depicting what they were doing and how ridiculous they were doing it. So it actually, like in the real world, had real world repercussions where the KKK stopped being as powerful as it is. And I think if, as weird as it sounds, they were able to portray the same message in today's society, it would be really cool. Just a real quick thought, and then I'll hang up and have your thoughts on it. If you have Superman's origin be exactly the same, but instead of landing in Kansas, they land in, I don't know, say Arizona or Texas, they can still be a white man from Krypton, but this time an immigrant Mexican family finds them. And then just develop, I don't know, just show how ridiculous the right wing is because they can scream crazy ideas and people perceive them as right. when in reality, like, they should be looked at as crazy. Thank you very much. Yeah, have a good one.
All right, appreciate the call. Thanks so much, Eddie. All right, that is the final call of the day. We're gonna read some IMs, and then we are going to get out of here.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Where does the O go? Where does Theo go in restaurant?
What?
Okay.
Okay. Emma casually dropping her movie credits in her house being used as a set. How very cul-de-sac of you. Yeah, I hesitated to say that other part, but you know, it'll
Drop
be
your
used against
IMDb link.
It'll be used against me at some point.
It's a funny thing to be used against you, though.
What? That my house was used in a movie?
Well, yeah.
It's over 100 years. It was over 100 years old, and like yeah. So my mom was very into that kind of stuff, like antiques and things like that. J Money, I'm honestly baffled that so many conservatives are going so hard on something. So, oh wait, I already read that one. Santa pause it. The newest outrage in right-wing snowflake circles is the introduction of Cracker Jill to accompany the venerable character Cracker Jack. Oh, the horror! I know. It's like I'm gonna cry myself to sleep tonight.
Oh, it's not over the word cracker.
Yeah, not that part. Maybe they'll figure a way to be outraged about that too. Congressional baseball fan. I'm convinced that Sean Penn went into character for The Secret Life of Walter Mitty and never left it. I haven't seen that movie. Brandon, I assume you have.
No, I remember the trailers being everywhere for a while though.
Yeah, I heard it was like a masturbatory project by Ben Stiller.
Yeah, I'm not into late Ben Stiller. No offense. Like early Ben Stiller, I'll watch Duplex before I watch the Secret Life of Walter Mitty.
Yeah. What was the like superhero
that
movie
movie.
with him and Janine Garofalo? My boyfriend was telling me about that
Mystery
the other
Men.
day. Yeah, he was saying that's like kind of
Classic.
secretly really good. Yeah.
Paul Rubens is in it
secretly,
too.
That's a great movie.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't know. Who else is
I
in
mean,
it?
just because
Paul
you weren't in it,
Rubens.
doesn't mean it's bad.
Wait, what'd you say?
Just because you weren't in it doesn't mean it's not a great movie. I know you.
I mean,
It's got a great cast, Mystery Men.
I
Actually, I'm
don't
looking
know.
through it now. Ben Stiller, Janine Garofalo, William H. Macy.
Hank Azaria's in it too, I think.
Yeah, Hank. Well, yeah, Hank Azaria, Paul Rubens. Isn't am I thinking of a different movie or wasn't
Kel Mitchell's in it?
Kel Mitchell's in it. Yes, thank you.
Invisible Boy.
Whoa, Dane Cook and Artie Lang are in it. What?
Dane Cook.
Oh yeah, Dane Cook was I don't think I watched it, but I was with Dane Cook.